All right. I literally have no tech skills at all. I'm a 53-year-old lady who suffered and struggled in extreme poverty like my whole life. And I'm trying to learn how to do screencasting and how to do streaming and videos so that I can, in short order, rebut anti-UBI drive-by assholes on the internet who have something to fucking say about something for the poor whom they claim to speak for, when I don't see any of them helping me fix my life. In fact, I haven't seen them help fix any poor, totally fucked person's life. I've seen them attack my friends in Yang Gang, though, for being pro-UBI. I've seen them attack UBI proponents, saying that they were all neoliberals and libertarians. Well, you know what? Yang Gang is a big tent. We're not all libertarians, and we're definitely not neoliberals. And you actually can be left-leaning and libertarian. Yes. But what I wanted to try to do was rebut this Twitter thread that my friend Angelo tagged me on. That I just don't have the time. When I'm struggling in survival mode, living in a house that's literally cramped with all my stuff is sitting behind me because the roof is so far gone that it snows and rains upstairs. And I literally don't have the room to set up a professional or semi-professional looking YouTube studio. I don't have the technical skills, for trying to do professional streaming and recording. But I've got a lot of stuff to share, a lot of facts. I just don't have the time to type it all out in an anthology of encyclopedias that would fill the entire fucking Library of Congress. Because 53 years of living as somebody from poverty, from generational poverty, who struggled and struggled and struggled and was never able to make it out. And now I don't even have a car. I'm 53. And I have no real way of earning an income to support myself. And I don't have the ability to be the basic economic stability needed to keep the utilities on and just to maintain, as it is, housing, albeit that's fallen apart, that's without heat, without hot water, and with a roof that's falling the fuck in. At least maintain that, and not instead of ending up out on the street underneath a bridge somewhere. Right? And I don't have the basic economic stability to try to take the full-time's job worth of time it would take me to learn all these difficult technical skills that I can't do it on my own without somebody, who's willing to take the time to walk me through it more than once, because I'm an older lady who was on the losing side of the digital divide. I didn't even have a computer or know how to use a computer until I was in my 40s. Never mind how to code. Never mind how to figure out how to use all this difficult, complicated technical equipment for doing podcasting, video casting, screencasting, whatever the fuck casting. And I'm stressed out because I needed help, and I begged for help to learn from people that, grew up with this technology. They're young enough to be my kid or my grandkid, who are at least living comfortably. Okay? They're not in danger of fucking dying because they can't afford food to take their insulin, or they're fucking facing homelessness as a disabled 50-some-year-old diabetic without even a fucking car to even try to get a minimum wage temporary census job with, or an Instacart delivery job with, which would at least be something. Yes, you can be too poor to get a job. And when you're so poor that you don't have the basic economic stability so that you can free up your time to learn decades worth of technology that you had not had the privilege and the opportunity to learn before, to try to learn it in a society where nobody who does have those skills ever seems to have the time to fucking help you and teach you or have the patience, because you know what the hell, everybody's got more important shit to do than to help a struggling older lady who is not technically skilled at all learn how to do a fucking podcast, whatever the hell you call this. I don't know what the hell it is. Podcast, videocast, whatever the fuck. I call it truth telling without having to write an encyclopedia. And what I wanted to do that I don't know how to do is get this to display properly so that I can scroll through this entire tweet thread where this drive-by asshole on the internet who's having a bad case of verbal diarrhea at the keyboard slamming on UBI advocates because he thinks that the answer to poverty and to the problems of people like me is a federal jobs guarantee. I mean, the concept of the words barriers sailed right over his or her pointy head. Barriers, you know, no car, no proper professional clothing, a house that's fallen apart, no heat in the winter in a part of the country where not having a winter heating utility is a fucking death sentence. We've been without our gas since 2005. Okay, we were never able to afford to get it back on. We have a pellet stove sitting behind me, if you can see behind my clutter in my chair, that uses pellets. It costs $1,400 for an entire winter's worth of supply of biomass pellets. And that stove needs electricity to run. My husband gets $1,000 a month in Social Security. I don't have a stable, steady, secure income at all, and I don't have the technical skills to get any money, to get an income. I've been begging and begging and begging. And you have no idea how soul-crushing that is, to beg and beg and beg. Only to have people not help or ignore your pleas or, you know, or whatever. And except for the one or two very rare and few and far between caring people who do have, you know, the capacity to help and who do help. You know, but, you know, ending up having to be destitute and having to beg because of being unable to economically provide for myself through no fault of my own, after having been forced out on a society's margins my whole life as a poor woman born from into the fucking underclass, into generational poverty. A poor woman who was trafficked from age 12 to 17. Because of being orphaned and homeless on the streets of Philly back in the 1980s. You know, they didn't even understand how to teach kids with learning disabilities like dyslexia when I was a kid. And now with dyslexia and an entire lifetime of disprivilege that accumulates and compounds, just like wealth compounds, mind you, poverty and disprivilege compounds. I'm struggling trying to learn how to use this equipment that a friend from Yang Gang sent me so I could do podcasts, to be a voice for why UBI is the only sane fucking solution. Yes, you can have a jobs guarantee, but not without UBI as a floor. And what I'm struggling trying to learn how to do with my lack of technical skills and my lack of even a corner in my house that's fallen apart, to have a somewhat professional looking setup, to even set up a damn green screen behind myself, to be able to rebut this nonsense. I can't even figure out how to get the browser to scroll in the streaming on this OBS streaming software stuff so that I can go through this entire thread. But the thing is, I already read the thread. And what this person optimist responding to my friend Angela, what this person is saying that the jobs guarantee would not force people to work to get money, would not, hurt the disabled or the elderly, or even, I'm not elderly, I'm just a senior citizen, hurt people like me that are older, that, have health problems and medical disabilities from diabetes complications, who don't even have a fucking shitty used car to get a part-time minimum wage census job with, okay? That their jobs guarantee can somehow fix my life and the lives of others like me, many that are even worse off than me, right? Because there's a lot of people that were permanently pushed out of the economy since 2008 that were never reabsorbed, and those are people that are my age and older. Many of them ended up out in the street, and a lot ended up dead as a result of poverty and destitution and homelessness. How the fuck is a jobs guarantee going to help people that are too poor and too disadvantaged, with way too much going against them for being able to work? There's a minimum degree of economic security and stability. You need a minimum level of access to resources. You need to have to be able to get a job if you're even offered one in the first place. Okay? Now, this jobs guarantee person sucked up an entire day's worth of time harassing my friends in Yang Gang and other UBI advocates, saying how we're all wrong, that the jobs guarantee is the only solution, that UBI would hurt the poor because it would give money to people who aren't poor and who are more fortunate and who are advantaged, and not just target the poor. Well, I'm going to rebut this thing as best as I can, and I apologize for not having the tech skills to know how to get this damn thing to scroll on streaming for you, even though I can scroll through it on the thread, looking at it. I'm looking at it right now. I apologize for not having the skills to know how to get it to scroll on the streaming thing so you can read these ridiculous, presumptuous assumptions blurted out by somebody who basically just, does not want to help the poor. And that's what this really boils down to. The first excuse is that people are, that the only reason people are poor is because they don't get paid enough to save. Well, you know what? You can't get paid anything if nobody will hire you. If you have been shut out of the job market your whole life, like I was, as a stigmatized and criminalized human trafficking survivor who was homeless for 2/3 of my adult life until I met and married my husband, who's a poor retired foundry worker, who's 24 years older than me and probably doesn't even have another year left to live. Okay? And, I tried everything. Do you have any idea how hard it is to earn a college degree, a STEM degree no less, when you're dyslexic and you're homeless and you're eating from garbage cans? Because that was my life. That was what I struggled. That is how hard I struggled and how hard I worked and tried to lift myself up out of extreme poverty and homelessness and destitution after this society threw me away and let me get trafficked and then fucking punished me for the rest of my life by making damn sure I wouldn't have a chance to have a life. Okay, so we're going to get into some truth-telling, and no, I'm not going to excuse my fucking language. If you are so privileged that a few F-bombs will put your panties in a fucking bunch, then you're too fucking privileged to listen or watch this attempt at a screencasted rebuttal, and you need to go find people to help that have real problems that are worse than yours. So moving right along. I'm going to go through this thread and I'm going to read it to you. This person, Optimist, says, and my friend Angelo says very, very accurately, says, saving for an unexpected emergency won't negate the stimulation of the economy that, of course, he means that a UBI would provide. And Optimist says, no, it does. Saving is literally the opposite of spending. Well, aren't people with privilege the first ones to browbeat the poor for not saving? And then when we do want to save or have an income to have something to save, that makes us the bad guys? Please explain to me like I'm four how in the cinnamon toast fuck that makes sense. And this person goes on and says, saving is all well and good, but this is government cash. Well, no shit, it's government cash. The U.S. government has the power of the purse. It spends money into existence. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. We all know that. The rich saving $1,200 checks helps no one. Here's the problem. If you have 80% of the country who is poor, follow me through here. With my limited skills and abilities, I understand and understood since I was 9 years old in the 4th grade at a Philadelphia public school that 80% is a hell of a lot more than 20%. Okay? Are we all on the same page here? Do you get that? That 20%, the top 20%, the middle and upper classes, that is 20% of the population. Half of the middle class got plunged into poverty. And many of us were already poor because we started out from poverty from the get-go and never even got to make it up to the lowest rung of middle class, which would be working class. All right? So you've got a burgeoning pool of permanently poor people here. That comprises about 80% of the population right now. 80%. And you got 20% who are doing okay. And they don't need, quote, don't need the UBI. Now, Optimist is saying right here that the rich saving $1,200 checks helps no one. That's true. Well, right now they're not helping anyone even though they're not getting the $1,200 checks. Okay? You got some rich people who are and many rich people who are not. So how is a UBI, how is maintaining a status quo of not having a UBI going to fix that? What having the UBI will fix is the 80% of the population who is not able to make it right now, at least having some hope and having a floor and having some basic economic stability so that we have something to keep on trying with, because you can't just keep on trying when you sink further and further and further down into the quicksand of poverty because you've been thrown away and left behind and nobody ever had the time to even fucking teach you teach you as a learning disabled person difficult tech skills. Okay? That you need to be a fucking engineer to figure out on your own, which I'm not. Okay? I'm smart at one thing. I know how to read candlestick charts. You know what UBI is to me? It's fuck you money. It's fuck you. I'm taking the time to have the stability that I need to learn these difficult skills and work for myself. Because there is one other skill I do have. I know how to trade. But zero doesn't compound upwards. You need an income and you need a certain amount of money to work with. Yeah, I know. It's one of those capitalist bourgeois things. Guess what? There's an entire trading community full of poor people that are slowly, painstakingly struggling to improve their lives by using the market as a vehicle. Go tell them how wrong they are when they turn a $1,200 COVID check into $5,000, which is what they needed to keep themselves from being evicted and putting food on the table and keeping the utilities on, because the system right now isn't helping us. Right? But anyway, I just want to make sure, does everybody understand that 20% is a much smaller number than 80%? And when you have 80% of the U.S. population of 350 million Americans who are poor and struggling and not making it, that to argue against UBI because of the 20% who don't need it will get something, you're arguing against the 80%, many of whom are too poor at this point to even be able to get a job. Even a government guaranteed one, because you need things like housing, a car, clothing, food. You need, if you have health issues or a medical disability, you're going to need to be insured that your boss, that your government guaranteed boss and your government guaranteed coworkers are not going to bully you out of your guaranteed job because they don't want to accommodate a diabetic or a Crohn's patient or somebody with a learning disability or somebody with mental health issue disabilities or anything like that on the job. And don't tell me people wouldn't do that. People do that. There was a fuck ton of workers in France last year who committed suicide when they were bullied because of age discrimination out of their government guaranteed job by their union brothers and sisters at their guaranteed workplace. Please explain to me, like I'm for, how putting people who are already extremely disadvantaged into a situation where they could be freaking hurt even worse is going to help them. I'm not the most skilled, smartest, skilled person in the world. But I'm 53 years old and I've experienced life in this society's shit-stained underwear, not its fancy lecture suit with a $64 million vocabulary. Do you get me? Do you feel me? Reading through this thread is just infuriating to me. Another member of Yang Gang and UBI advocate, Amino, explains that people who are poor are less likely to save, but saving is their ticket out of poverty. Yes, it is. And in order to be able to do that, you need what? Bang, an income. An income. And Optimist goes on and on and on to say here, no, it's not. That's a fallacy. Blah, blah, blah. That's Republican nonsense. People aren't poor because they don't save. They're poor because they don't get paid enough to save. And they don't get paid enough because of the unemployment buffer that undermines their bargaining. Well, you know what? We're all very aware of the Nauru principle of the unemployment buffer. And what we're also aware of is that when you are too poor to be able to get a job, when you have health problems and medical disabilities, and you're over age 50 and you can't get a job that's feasible and reasonable for you to be able to succeed at doing based on your physical abilities as well as your academic or skill set abilities that you have, that you might or don't have, that you would have if you weren't struggling in literal life and death poverty every goddamn day, which sucks up all your bandwidth so that you can't learn difficult new skills. Okay? Right? It's not because of bargaining. It's because the lack of basic economic stability, the lack of a floor. People can fix their lives if they at least have a floor to stand on to do it. Right? Does everybody understand the difference between a floor and not having a floor? Do I need to explain that? I mean, I'm not a smart person. I'm just some poor, simple, older woman living in bumfuck Egypt in Erie County, Pennsylvania. But I at least know that. Okay? I'm not smart. I'm not skilled. I'm just one of society's poor, dumb losers, right? But there's certain basic things that I understand, and I understand what having a floor means. which obviously this person does not. And then Optimist goes on to say, people aren't rich because they save. No one ever said that rich people are rich because they save. What we're saying is that poor people can't fix our situations and fix our lives, which, guess what? Being able to save is a critical core component of being able to do. Being unable to save compounds poverty. Being without an income compounds poverty. Do you get that? And then Optimist goes on and says, and the reason you can't save is because your rich employer doesn't pay you enough. What rich employer? I haven't been able to get an employer to even get a job. I struggled for 6 years trying to break into tech, but because I'm dyslexic and an older lady and didn't even know how to use a computer, never mind how to fucking program one or learn how to code, I struggled and got into that Rails Girls thing when I was in my late 40s. And I struggled for several years trying to break into tech. I had to go into debt to buy the right computer, the right equipment. Had to go into debt to buy a car that I couldn't afford the payments on just so I'd have transportation to go apply for jobs and go to meetups and go to networking events, only to never get a chance, only to never have one single door open for me. Right? Okay? So, this, and I was trying to build those skills with a learning disability around my electric and my internet being shut off every couple of months. Because my husband's $1,037 a month Social Security check just simply isn't enough for one person to live, never mind two. Especially two who have extra costs because of having disabling health problems where everything we need isn't covered by Medicaid. Medicaid won't buy me a car to get to medical appointments for my special diabetic medical care that I need. Like for the vision, that I suffered vision loss as a result of complications. I suffered neuropathy. Okay. These are things that are irreversible, but that can at least be arrested if I could access medical care. Well, I can't walk 20 miles across the county in an area with no public transport to get to the medical care and get home. Right? But a UBI would help me save up to buy a crappy used car, so at least I could do that. And I was trying to learn these skills around utility shutoffs and around having a learning disability that I never got helped with. I didn't even get a basic education from age 12 to 17 because my traffickers didn't let me go to school. They sure as fuck weren't about to pay for me to go to the Sylvan Center or some other place that helps kids with learning difficulties be able to succeed and learn in school. I had to struggle to make up for the basic education I didn't get when I was an adult after I escaped my traffickers with no help from the society that threw me away and let that happen to me in the first place. Thank you very much. And all I got for all my efforts and struggle was put down and mocked and told that I somehow deserved to be poor and deserved to not have my basic needs met. Basic needs that I suffered without for throughout my life. Housing, healthcare. The basic economic security that if I wanted to buy some technical equipment and learn and build skills and, even if nobody else could take the time to help me, at least I'd have the time and the ability to breathe to devote the time to it myself. That's what a UBI would have meant. It would have meant having that and being able to do stuff. It would have meant being able to say, fuck you. I deserve a space in this society that isn't the gutter in an early grave. Right? 80% of Americans need that $1,200 check on a monthly basis. Need it because $1,200 is bigger than zero. And they need that because You need to have a basic level of economic stability and security to be able to work in any kind of a job, whether it's a job that you create for yourself or whether it's a guaranteed job from somebody, somewhere. Don't know where. So then this person, and Amino makes a really good point. And it's the point that I've always made. That relaxing conditions, because apparently Optimist has a problem with giving money to the rich, the ones who don't need a UBI. The rich make up such a tiny percentage of the population. The middle class and the rich comprise about 20%, but the rich is like less, it's like 10% or less. Now, 10% or less of 350 million, okay, is a much smaller number than 80% of 350 million. Do you get that? Are you with me? So in order to not give it to that tiny slice of the population who really doesn't need it, this person wants to not give any money to the 80% who do, with the ones at the very bottom of that 80% who've had shit luck their whole lives, who were never able to make it up out of poverty, needing it the most and not getting it because of this kind of crap. Oh, we can't give it to the poor because the rich might get it too. There's a lot more poor people in America than there are middle class and rich people. Okay? There are. And locking out the wealthy locks out the poor. We have means-tested programs right now that are garbage. With the diabetes complications that I have that really prohibit me from being able to work outside of the home, even if I was able to get a car, there would be very limited jobs that I would be able to realistically succeed at doing without a problem. With the disabling issues that I have that I don't really want to get into because it's deeply personal, but they are medical and they are physical. It's stuff that, it's not something that you can just positive think or positive attitude your way out of, because you can't positive think your way out of being a diabetic. You can't positive attitude away neuropathy of the bladder or being legally blind in one eye so you can't see to drive at night. Those are things that you can't positive think your way out of. You can't even positive think your way out of being dyslexic, which limits your other, ability to learn other skills, to be able to have a quote, white collar professional type of job with, right? So locking the rich out, what happens is we have that now. It's called means testing, except it doesn't lock out the rich who don't need it. It locks out currently about 13 million or more of the poorest Americans who definitely do need it, who aren't getting anything. It locks out people like me from getting a $700 a month SSI check, which isn't enough to live on anywhere. Because my husband's Social Security retirement pegs me as too rich to qualify for an SSI check, and I didn't get the opportunity to build enough Social Security credits, in paid employment in my life to be able to qualify for SSDI, which is different. So I would have to go for SSI, which is actually technically welfare, okay? And it is. It's actually part of the welfare program. And in order to get that $700 a month check, which involves a 2-year appellate process, I would have to not be earning any income at all, okay? I would have to get a divorce and move out of the marital home, which, as you can see, is literally falling apart around me. You can see all my stuff is crammed down here into one room. I don't even have, any physical space, that's feasible in my home to set up my computer and microphone to try to do a professional looking podcast from. right? I'm doing this right now the way things are because rebutting this anti-UBI garbage is more important than whether or not I have a professional looking YouTube studio or the enough tech skills to make an impressive looking video. What matters is that the truth gets told and that these crackpots who are anti-UBI get shut down. Get shut down. Because they have never had to rely on these programs that they claim is the best thing since toast. When I can't get an SSI check because my impoverished elderly husband's Social Security check of $1,037 a month pegs me as too rich, that I would have to get a divorce and move out of the marital home and live where? With no money and nowhere to go. I don't have living family to take me in. That's an option that hasn't been available to me since I was 12. You know, kind of losing my family and ending up homeless and trafficked. You know, ending up homeless and at age 12 with no family. That's how I got trafficked in the first place. I want you to think about that. Real hard. Because that's what these people are basically saying. They're saying that UBI would hurt this country's most disadvantaged people because it would also give some money to people who don't need it. The means-tested programs we have would require me to get a divorce and be homeless as a diabetic. No way to store food, no way to store my insulin, no way to take proper hygienic care of myself, especially of my feet, which is a special concern that all diabetics have because it is so easy to get, infections on your feet that don't heal because when you're diabetic, you don't heal. And then you end up with septic infections that result in amputation. That's why so many diabetics suffer amputations. Diabetes also causes loss of eyesight. I suffered loss of 80% of my vision in my right eye. You need to have food to take insulin with. And it has to be food that's diabetic friendly. That's not loaded in starches, carbs, and sugars. That means you need a place to live and a means to cook. But SSI, this wonderful means testing program, says, no, Mrs. Homan, you got to get a divorce and go live out in the streets somewhere with no way to take care of yourself as a diabetic with disabilities already. And maybe 2 years from now, we'll rule in your favor and you'll get an SSI check. And the lawyer that you will have to get to handle the appeal will automatically grab a third of it. Even though that lawyer didn't suffer, I did. Yes, this is what an entitlement program is. Obviously not very much of an entitlement if you need a lawyer to help you get it. And then when you're given, if you survive, if you actually manage to not die from destitution and homelessness in the interim, and you actually live to see that back due SSI amount, that lawyer gets a third of it. This is what this person who is opposing UBI is defending. This is what they are supporting. Instead of everybody getting a $1,200 or maybe more. Many people in the UBI camp are saying $1,500 to $2,000. Okay? And we could do that if we got rid of garbage programs that don't work, that hurt the poor. I mean, how is getting a divorce? My husband's the only family I got. How is getting a divorce and being homeless as a disabled diabetic with no way to take care of myself and my needs as a disabled diabetic fucking helping me? How is being forced into permanent destitution because SSI says you can't have any more than $2,000 worth in total assets ever. That includes life insurance policies. That includes a shitty used car. Good luck even finding a car that runs that you can spend $2,000 on, you know? I mean, $2,000, that ain't jack. And this is what they're telling you. You can't even have that or you don't get an SSI check. And if you try to improve your life, you get kicked right off that program. If you try to pull yourself up out of poverty and use some of that $700 a month, which is definitely not enough to live on, to fix your life. And the same people that are defending that and saying how helpful that is for the poor and the disabled who can't work are the same people who want to tell you that a $1,200 a month UBI would hurt people like me. This is the logic, folks. All right? And, Optimist concedes that point, says you're confusing the issue. People shouldn't be locked out, that's for sure. Shouldn't, yeah, but that's what's happening. But that's no reason to hand money directly to the wealthy on a deficit so they can invest in T-bills that earn more interest. That's very, very neoliberal, bro. Guess what? Right now, a lot of wealthy people have their money invested in a whole bunch of different things. Real estate, cryptocurrency, stocks, mutual funds, commodities, bonds. T-bills is only one of over 8,000 instruments to trade on the public exchanges. What kind of limited imagination do you think the rich have? Do you think they put all their money in one basket? Or do you think they might spread it around a little to a bunch of different baskets? You know what a lot of rich people invest in? They invest in they invest as angel investors, as early investors before companies can go public with IPOs. They get in as early investors because you have to have a minimum of $250,000 to do this, right? And they invest in ventures or companies that right before they go public with IPO. And they clean house like what just happened with Snowflake. Software company that just IPO'd and literally doubled on its first day. I mean, anybody who thinks that the rich are just going to take a $1,200 check and invest it in T-bills, and no matter what they invested in, does it really matter? You're talking about at the most strict, definitive line between upper middle class and rich. But if we want to throw the upper middle class in there, that's top 20%. Is depriving them of that $1,200 a month to invest in whatever. Are you willing to also deprive the 80% who need the $1,200 a month to live and save $50 a month at a time to build up an oh shit fund? Now, if you need me to explain to you what an oh shit fund, it's oh shit. We just got notice from my husband's life insurance company that because of his age, his premium is going to double as of next month. And we either pay it even though we don't have the income to afford it, or we lose the cash building life policy that we have, that they took all the cash value out of to meet the premium increase because, as their argument was, his age and his pre-existing health conditions made him more expensive to insure, so it raised the premium, so they took the cash value out of that. And now they're contacting me on short notice saying there's nothing left in the cash value, that, we got to somehow come up with $450 a month. If we both had a UBI, that would still be a crunch, but it wouldn't be impossible. Oh shit is getting hit with something like that you have no way of being able to mitigate. Especially when you've had no economic opportunities since forever. Going and getting a job is not going, even if somebody was willing to give me a job right now, it's not going to be enough in time to help me. And that life insurance policy is only for $50,000. That covers a burial and maybe will provide for me to not be homeless and out on the street for at least a year. As a poor, disadvantaged, marginalized older lady that was shut out of jobs all my life, who doesn't have a 401k to live on, who doesn't have family to take me in and take care of me. So it's like my 78-year-old husband, who probably doesn't even have a year left to live because of the health issues he's going through. It's like somehow come up with $450 a month for these premiums that we can't afford, or the insurance gets canceled and the money he paid into it all these years, 20 years, gone. I mean, you want to talk about a ripoff. Whole life and variable universal life policies, that is the payday lender for the middle class. And you pay all that money, and then you run into financial hardship, and you can't afford your bills, you can't afford your premium, then you lose everything you paid in. You don't have the insurance anymore, so you get nothing when your loved one dies and leaves you destitute. And you don't have any way of recouping all that money you paid in. Right? But hey, some educated white-collar schmuck with privilege had to make his commission, right? Don't even get me started. UBI would mean the difference of whether or not we could keep that life insurance policy, so I'm not thrown out onto the street with nowhere to go and not even a shitty used car to go there with. After he dies. It's not like, I have the same opportunities available to me as somebody who's 20 or 30 years old, who's not physically disabled, who's not diabetic, and who doesn't have a learning disability like dyslexia, making it damn near impossible to learn difficult new tech skills in a society where people who do have them skills don't ever have time to help those of us who don't have those skills to learn them skills. Because, we would need a lot of hand-holding, and nobody's got the time. UBI would provide some time. I can't imagine how that would be a bad thing. Everybody having the opportunity to breathe and be able to learn stuff. Doesn't have to be tech stuff either. They could be learning how to read candlestick charts so that they can learn how to trade. It's like one thing I know how to do, except the slap in my face is that having been poor my whole life, I never got to capitalize on that skill. And that's like the ultimate. And what this person is saying on Twitter is that it's neoliberal and anti-poor to give a UBI out because some people who don't need it will get it. While ignoring the fact that 80% of Americans who do need it won't get it if we don't have it. Not having a UBI is the neoliberal social Darwinist, solution. And people, and this optimist goes on to say, that's not what's going on. They have to fucking buy shit to live. They literally cannot save because the price level is set by the people who employ people. No, the price level is set by the demand economy. The demand. Prices are determined by what the market will bear. What is the market? Okay, I want you to think about this. What is a market? Does a market exist when people do not have the money to buy anything? My friend, I want to give a shout out to my friend Nate Lewis, who bought me this microphone stuff with the hopes that I could learn how to do screencasting and podcasting, to do some professional stuff so I could get online and rebut these morons, right? And rebut this nonsense. The prices are not set by the employers. The prices for goods and services are set by the amount of people in a society that have money to afford to buy the goods and services with. Now, the last time I looked, folks, you can't pay your electric bill, your water bill, your rent, or your mortgage, or your property taxes, or buy food or clothing or winter coat or a microphone to do podcasts on nothing but karma points. Do you feel me? If you doubt me, go to the supermarket, fill up a shopping cart full of food, and then when you go to the cash register, say, I'm broke, I don't have any income, I have no money, but you know what? I have all these karma points. Can I pay for my groceries with karma points? Can I pay for it with thoughts and prayers? Can I pay for it with pipe dreams? Guarantee you're going to get laughed out of that store on your ass. They might even escort you out. Prices are set by what the market will bear. Now, what that means is that there has to be a sustainable market, that there's enough people that have enough money, enough income to be able to afford to buy the things at the prices they're being offered for sale at. That is what sets price level. That's it. You know, markets are a construct that require two sides of a transaction here. A seller side and a buyer side. If you have no buyers, it doesn't matter how cheap that seller lowers his or her price. If you have no money at all, if you have no income at all, if you have nothing, it doesn't matter if he or she offers that item for $1.99, because if you don't even have a fucking $1.99, it's a moot point. We clear? All right, moving on. And then Amino says, indeed, which is why I support recurring payments in the first place. This is what UBI advocates are arguing. This is why we support recurring UBI payments. And then Optimus says, it seems that, oh God, this is infuriating. Okay, trigger warning, virtue signaling coming up. This is enough to give me a bout of explosive diarrhea. Optimus then says, it seems like you just don't care about wealth inequality. You want the poor to be on a feeding tube of wealth constantly that just goes to the rich that have all the pricing power at the moment. Ludicrous. I hate to say this, but I think Optimus has it backwards in a huge way. Here's the problem. Zero doesn't compound upwards. Money has to flow to the poor somehow. Right? And once it does, that money gets circulated into the economy. It gets spent. It gets spent on goods and services. It gets spent on courses, on learning and building skills. It gets spent on microphones. It gets spent on computers. It gets spent on fabric to make clothing with. I know most people don't make clothes, but there's a huge contingency in this country that love to go to Renaissance fairs, and, you know, making your own medieval Tudor-style clothing is actually a big niche market. Big niche market. But that's a topic for another talk show on the fashion styles, from how dresses have not really changed much in style from the Norman French period in the 1000s up till now. If I stand up and show you my dress without the cowl neck and the pocket, its basic pattern style is Norman French. Just FYI. So anyway, Optimist has this really reversed in a huge way. The money has to come to the poor from somewhere. It doesn't materialize out of nothing. Zero doesn't compound upwards. Money flows to the poor by either other people choosing to give us money and help us, or help us with jobs or something. Money comes to the poor from the people who have money to, pay the poor. Whether it's, through a UBI or jobs or a shitty means testing program that, garbage. Money doesn't just sprout out of the ground in the wilderness. It doesn't grow wild like Queen Anne's lace, which is one of the best natural contraceptives. Oh, okay. I won't go there. Anyway, money doesn't grow on trees. It comes from people who already have money. Wealth inequality is the result of the floor having been collapsed from underneath the poor. While we used to have a safety net with the welfare programs that were utterly decimated with welfare reform, even in their heyday at their most generous, those welfare benefits were punitive, and they were conditional, they were means testing. They didn't even give you enough to live, and be able to pull yourself up out of poverty, because you got slapped down the minute you tried to better your life. Okay, that's what means testing does. And it also excludes a lot of people who definitely need it. Because they're just not able to, as square pegs, fit into the nice round holes that the bureaucracy would like us to be able to fit into. I've had experience in trying to get help from these programs. I'd rather see them all scrapped in lieu of a livable UBI for everyone. And when I say livable UBI, I'm talking, $1,500, $2,000 a month. Scrap the programs that are garbage, that exclude too many people, that don't give enough help, and that force you to stay destitute to get anything. That is how you create a permanent underclass. That's how you make sure that people that are trapped in that permanent underclass never have a way out. And I can't think of anything more neoliberal and more social Darwinistic and more cruel and more craptastically assholian than that. But don't take my word for it. I'm just some poor dumb older lady from bumfuck Egypt, Erie County, Pennsylvania. What could I possibly know about poverty and what I would need to fix my life? Because obviously, Optimist knows it all, right? Optimist and other anti-UBI shit posters on Twitter know it all, even though they've never been poor and never had to use those programs. They've never had to jump through hoops to try to get an inadequate amount of help that was never enough to lift them up out of poverty. And then people wonder why I have anger issues. All right. Couldn't possibly imagine why. So Optimist goes on to say, says, okay, so your idea is to give people money to save from each other so that the stimulus doesn't work to get people's jobs back, resulting in decline of output and the consolidation of industry. Good luck with that. You have to think harder. I'm telling you. No, I'm telling you. The idea is to make access to resources unconditional for people to use as they see fit. And to stop picking winners and losers by an unfair system that says, oh, you're poor, you're disadvantaged, sorry for your luck, but you got to stay down and stay poor. That's your place. This is where you belong. No, you can't have anything. You can have this $700 a month SSI check that you have to jump through hoops every year to recertify for, to prove that you're still disabled and economically disadvantaged enough to need. That's means testing. And no, you better not get caught sleeping over in your formerly co-owned marital home with your now ex-husband to spend time with him so that at least the last few months he's got to live. He's not alone. Because you get caught doing that and, oh, you didn't really get a sincere divorce. You're not really alone. You don't need the SSI. Bang, you lose your benefit. Take your fucking garbage programs and shove them up your ass. You think you're helping people with crap like that? Get real. The only people you're helping is able-bodied, economically advantaged, and intellectually and academically advantaged upper middle class bureaucrats and caseworkers who need to have a permanent class of poor, fucked people in the permanent underclass to justify their upper middle class jobs with their upper middle class health benefits and paid vacation and pensions as state workers. I don't exist to provide someone else a comfortable life at the expense of me even getting to have a chance for any kind of life at all. Go fuck yourself. In the ass. Sideways with a cactus, if that's what you think. And no, I'm not going to excuse my French. I've had my fill of this kind of crap being circulated by people who wouldn't, if they had to live one day in my shoes, they'd have blown their fucking brains out. If they had to try to go through the demeaning humiliation and the not getting helped and or not getting the appropriate help or not even getting enough help that I've had to go through as somebody with so much going against me that I was fucked forever having a chance my entire life, if they think that's so great, I challenge them to give up all of their comforts and to try to jump through the same hoops of those same programs and try to survive on nothing but the whim of a bureaucrat at one of these, one of these social service agencies who they get to go home to their good life whether or not you get helped. Even though their job wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the poor. Let's have a talk about the power dynamics of privilege, shall we? Except let's not talk about rich versus, the rich who don't need a UBI. Let's talk about the upper middle class welfare bureaucrats and government bureaucrats and executives of a significant number of charities out there that exist only to provide revenue streams for the already advantaged, while the people who need help the most get nothing except shit and shoved in it. Let's have that discussion. Somehow I don't think too many people want to have that discussion outside of, the UBI camp. So Optimist goes on to say, that this is, a bad idea. That unconditional income is a bad idea. And Amino One was right when he or she said, no, my idea was to make the resource unconditional for people to use as they see fit. Yes, because people know what we need, and we know that what we need to fix our lives. Right? That's given. And to stop trying to engineer particular outcomes in a top-down way. And that's critical. How this is a top-down approach is that you have bureaucrats or some people being in a position of privilege and power to decide whether or not you deserve to survive, whether or not you get that SSI benefit, whether or not you get that chance for a job, whether or not you get a Social Security widow's benefit that's enough to survive on, which at 55% of your deceased spouse's benefit level, I guarantee you it is not. Whether or not you get help from a private charity. If you support a structure where a handful of people get to decide who gets to survive and who does not, if this is what you support, then you do not care about the poor, you do not support basic human rights. You do not support the things you claim to support. You support an agenda that is all about power and control. And if a bunch of poor people and disabled people end up excluded and not helped or not given enough help to survive, oh well, sorry for your luck. That's what you're telling us. Okay? And then Optimist goes on to say, the only thing should be if you don't have a job or are underemployed, you can get a job or some hours. Well, you can't get a job when you're too poor and too disadvantaged and have health problems that restrict what jobs you can do when nobody is willing to hire you anyway. Even at the limited skills you might have. Money isn't just a tool to get people to work for society. And that's what Optimist says. Money is just a tool to get people to work for society. No, no, no. Money is the medium of exchange. Money is the medium of exchange through which we obtain resources that we need to live. Because we can't just go pitch a tent or a yurt in the public park and poach a fucking deer if we're starving and homeless. Because private property excluded us from the commons. And while it wouldn't be very practical to just seize all the private property that the rich and the corporations have already grabbed up for themselves, and the upper middle class with their suburban McMansions, okay? It's not going to be practical to seize their houses and their property and the real estate it sits on. But what is practical is to have a UBI so that so that the majority of the population who has been alienated from and denied and deprived of access to the earth's resources needed to live has that medium of exchange that's needed to otherwise acquire the resources you need to survive. Is this in any way unclear? I can try to explain this simpler. I don't know if I can. Money is a medium. We don't carry abacus beads or seashells or wampum belts or in other cultures, it would be coconuts to exchange for what we need to live. Money is the medium. It's not a tool to get people to work. To force people to work, the tool is called economic terrorism, where poverty is the tool to get people to work, and the ones who can't work or who are too badly off to be able to get a job, or who are just shut out in a society that does not have enough jobs for all, never did, never will, okay? That poverty is used to keep the ones who are at least fortunate to get jobs from complaining if they don't like the way they're being treated at their job. It is the coercive factor of using, the sheer economic terrorism of life-threatening poverty. That's the tool to, quote, get people to work for society. And let's talk about work for society for a minute. Society would not exist without the centuries of unpaid caretaking work that has mostly fallen on women, including me. This one. Where's my remuneration for that work? Where's the remuneration for every caregiver who has been shortchanged economically? And not just you can't just pin this all on capitalism. Last I recall reading, nobody in any of the former socialist countries received a paycheck as recognition and acknowledgement of the value of their unpaid work as a homemaker or caretaker. And yet, without that work, there wouldn't even be a society in the first place. And as it stands, we have a society that's not even worth reproducing in. Right? Because things have gotten that bad. Money is not just a tool to get people to work. Money is a medium of exchange that people have to have in order to get what they need to survive. That's it. The tool to get people to work for society is economic terrorism. The threat of poverty is economic terrorism. And life-threatening poverty, which results in death and permanent disability, immeasurable suffering, on a scale that would be rendered unconstitutional by the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. We don't condemn convicted axe murderers to starve to death or freeze to death out on the street with no clothes, no housing, no food. We house them in prisons, not ideal, and we even feed them right up until and provide them with a hot shower and a cot and clothing until the day they're executed. And you know what? Poor marginalized women who were trafficking survivors who were shut out of jobs their whole lives because of underage prostitution records that weren't expunged until our middle-aged years kept us out. We get less than that. We get taken care of less than you would take than what this society takes care of a convicted fucking serial killer. Poor mothers and poor displaced homemakers who were forced to try to compete for jobs without even having a snowball's chance in hell of landing one. Poor disabled people who can't get jobs. People who are too poor to even afford a shitty used car to get to a job if offered one are not even being taken care of as well. as convicted serial killers on Pennsylvania in the prison system. Let that sink in for a hot minute. And then come back to me and talk to me about work. Or you can tell me how women's work and unpaid caretaking and all this other stuff isn't work. And then you can tell me how you gave birth to your own useless ass, breastfed yourself, and changed your own fucking diaper. And I got a bridge to sell. So anyway, Optimus goes on to say, goes on to insult Amino and the other people in this thread by calling Yang Gang folks fascists. And this is just so disgusting. Optimus says UBI is not freedom. Not being able to ever get a job is not freedom. Well, right now I don't have UBI and I haven't been able to ever get a job. So I'm definitely not free. But I would be free if I had a UBI. At least I'd have freedom from starvation and the threat of ending up destitute because of having to choose. Do we have groceries and the electric on so we have heat this winter? Or do we have that life insurance policy so that I don't have to beg through yet another fucking GoFundMe for not only what it will cost to bury my husband, but to hopefully have some money left to live and keep myself from ending up out on the street when he dies and the Social Security check isn't coming in anymore. And if I wasn't able to get a chance for a job before I hit my 50s, before I got sick with Crohn's disease, before I became diabetic, and before we lost our vehicle to repossession, if I wasn't getting a chance for a job then, you'd have to be an idiot to think I stand a chance of getting a job now. With all this going against me on top of being older. What kind of a moron even thinks that not having a UBI or that not having a UBI hurts the people who have no hope and no chance at all? UBI gives at least hope and a chance to people who right now have none. And there's a lot of us. UBI most certainly is freedom. Yes, being discriminated out of jobs your whole life is not freedom. But the reason it's not freedom is because there has never been any alternative. It's like, if you can't get a job, you starve, you die from dental abscesses, you die from no health care, you die from being exposed to the elements from being homeless. It wasn't the job that provided freedom from those things. It was the money that the job provided. But if jobs isn't the only way to provide the money, as UBI would provide the money, then how's that not helpful, right? And then Optimus says, having $1,000 a month is not freedom if you can't get paid otherwise. Well, right now, I can't get paid otherwise, and I don't have $1,000 a month income. How am I somehow more free? Free to what? Free to die from diabetic complications, from not being able to afford food to take my insulin? Free to die from my electric being shut off and my insulin spoiling? Free to die from ending up homeless in my condition? From not having the income needed to at least maintain at the level I'm existing at? Which is really fucking depressing. As it is. Having $1,000 a month is a lot more than having zero. I'm one of those people who can't get paid otherwise. I wasn't able to. I tried. I couldn't get a chance. Nothing ever worked out for me. I went into debt for a degree that should have opened doors for me and didn't open one. I was stuck on the losing side of the digital divide until my late 40s. And I'm way behind, light years behind all these younger people, the millennials and the Gen Z, with the technology. Do I have time to learn it? No, I'm too busy scrambling trying to get help to keep myself alive and keep my husband alive. UBI would free me up from that so that I could keep myself and my husband alive and have the time, the stability, the basic floor that I could learn. As hard as it will be for me as an older lady who is multiply disadvantaged. There's nothing neoliberal about that, about UBI. UBI is more progressive than anything the Great Society programs ever produced. It's certainly more progressive than the New Deal. And that's another thing. With these means-tested conditional programs and job guarantee, the idea that people are not worth anything and don't deserve to survive unless they're able to work and willing to do work that they might not otherwise want to do, in exchange for barely enough money to survive, right? That is somehow freedom. Arbeit macht frei rings a bell. UBI isn't freedom, but being forced to work or left to die if you can't work somehow is. UBI is freedom precisely because without the ability to get what you need to survive, you have no freedom. You have no freedom. Do you understand that? UBI says, here is X amount of dollars a month. And how you use it to best fix your life, no problem. Fix your life. Do what you need to do. And it's not a bad pitch, because Optimus goes on to say, well, that's a bad pitch because it implies that if I have $1,000 a month and can't get a job, I can have agency to make more money somehow. It doesn't work like that. Excuse me, yes, the fuck it does. If I have, right now, you know what? I can't get a job, and I haven't been able to get a job for many, many years. And I don't have $1,000 a month income. My husband has $1,000 a month income, but that's not enough for two people to survive. But if I had $1,000 a month and he had $1,000 a month, we'd be okay. So what they're saying is, if I have $1,000 a month and can't get a job, I can have the agency to make more money somehow. It doesn't work like that. Yes, it does. What does not work is when you have zero income a month and you can't get a job. And you don't have what you need to survive or anything on top of survival so that you actually have something to keep on trying with. If you have $1,000 a month UBI and you can't get a job, and I think it will be a lot more than that, because it's just, with the way this pandemic has panned out, half the jobs that were lost with COVID, they're not coming back. They're not coming back. And that means that the pool of permanently poor people has just been grown significantly. And this is not a problem that can correct itself by just ignoring that suffering and not giving out money, okay? But where Optimist gets this wrong and says, if I have $1,000 a month and can't get a job, I can have agency to make more money somehow. It doesn't work like that. Yes, it fucking does. Because that UBI payment is it is more than the absolute nothing you have right now. You need more than zero to even be able to keep on trying. And let me tell you how you can make more money somehow. With that UBI, and maybe you'll only be able to save $50 a month out of it or less. Who knows? But even if it's only $10 a month, you can slowly save that after covering your basic survival costs, basic living costs, and save $10, $20, $50 a month until you have enough to purchase an item or tool or piece of equipment that would enable you to start creating your own venture. Maybe it's making clothing. Maybe it's making bespoke shoes. Maybe it's doing podcasting and screencasting stuff if you have that skill set. Maybe it's putting that money to work in the markets by trading. I know that zero doesn't compound upwards, but I know that $1,000 does. And I can prove that. The payout for UBI is not fixed at a certain amount. Andrew Yang threw out $1,000 to land on just to start his proposal, because he knew that he would be met with a lot of reticence to the idea of giving poor people free money for nothing. So he didn't want to alienate the people who just don't want to give any money to the poor, right? But he has since then come out and called for a higher UBI amount. And the way we can do that is if we get rid of punitive, conditional, means-tested garbage programs that I personally have had the wanting to blow my fucking brains out experience of having to deal with, only to get not helped or not helped anywhere near enough. Like food stamps during a pandemic, when I couldn't use the food stamps on Instacart as a poor rural woman with no fucking car to get to the supermarket. I got food stamps that I could not use to buy food. It was friends of mine in Yang Gang that literally saved my life. And it was a charity, the only one that ever really helped me, which was Andrew Yang's Humanity Forward. That micro grant of $250 was the difference between me having food so I could take my insulin. Because, I can't just flip a switch and not be diabetic anymore. Until I'm no longer poor someday, maybe. Doubtful. Not at my age. I have no hope left anymore. But this is what $1,000 a month means. It means you're not left to fucking suffer and die. And you might have a chance of fixing your life, but you definitely won't with zero. UBI's a floor. So that way, if you can't get a job, at least you have that. At least you have that. But you have no agency for anything if you end up dying from freaking poverty. You have no agency. 700 Americans die in this country every day directly as a result of poverty. That's 700 American lives a day that would not be dying from poverty if they would have had a UBI. Unfortunately, they couldn't survive all the things they had going against them while sinking further and further into the quicksand of poverty. And hopefully live long enough to get a chance for a job without having anything to survive on in the interim. Please tell those 700 dead Americans that died today how much more agency they have without a UBI. Now they're fucking dead. What's the next idiot comment this person makes? Because I don't get to decide how much things cost, how much I need to eat, what repairs I need to get on my car, and how often I need to go to the doctor. Yes, nobody gets to decide those things. Nobody gets to decide those things. And then Optimist says, but if you are prevented from working because of your employment history or incarceration, FUBI is an insult to injury. It's completely just pretending that individuals in those situations have any control over their lives. They don't. That's an illusion. Well, I am one of those individuals in that situation. And the reason we don't have any control over our lives is because we don't even have a basic income to survive on. So that we have something to at least survive so that we can keep trying and keep fighting. You know? It's an insult to my intelligence as somebody who suffered soul-crushing, abject poverty my entire life to be told that giving me a basic income, whether it's $1,000 or whether it's more than that, doesn't give me agency. You know what agency you have when your income is zero and you have no chance and no hope of ever getting any? That is not having any control over your life and not having any agency. And then Optimist says, but job guarantee would be much better than FUBI. I don't understand why you want the federal government to decide the payout either. That seems pretty top down. Well, isn't arguing for paternalistic, patriarchal, stingy, paltry, means-tested, broken safety net programs also top down? Which, by the way, have always been the source of contention and targets due to political revanchism? People aren't likely to attack a benefit that everybody gets. Because you won't have pissed off people going, well, I worked hard and I'm successful. My tax dollars are paying for those losers and I don't get that. UBI takes all that out of the equation. Bum. Everybody gets. Let me ask you a question. If you're opposed to UBI, if you oppose UBI but you support a federal jobs guarantee and Medicare for all, if you support universal health care without condition, and you agree that that's a human right, why isn't having enough money to survive, whether or not you have a paid job, a human right? That doesn't compute. You know, just doesn't. And Amino goes on to say the federal government wouldn't need to. It wouldn't need to determine the UBI payout since it's pegged to CPI, the Consumer Price Index. Yang had the initial amount of $1,000 for pragmatic reasons, which I already explained. But you could also determine it in a similar way to that of Henry George. Henry George. This was the guy who came up with this. This is fantastic. If you ever get a chance to read his work, he talked about, remuneration for our loss of access to the commons because of the over the centuries, how private property and the enclosures have, deprived people of access to the Earth's resources, and we all, deserve to be able to survive. And nobody created the Earth. Nobody created the water, the land, the atmosphere. Nobody created that. Nobody created the animals in the forest or the fish in the streams and in the oceans. No person created those things. No person. Nobody created the sky. Nobody created the ozone layer. Nobody created the magnetosphere that protects our asses from one big giant gamma ray coming in the form of a solar flare hauling ass at us faster than Madonna's underwear. All right? Get real. Henry George had this brilliant idea that, the closest thing we could do is pay everybody remuneration as a form of back due rent and rent that's due for our loss of access to Earth's resources through centuries upon centuries of the development of private property law, which is a man-made construct, which is very much top-down. But a UBI kind of levels that, says, hey, we're compensating you for your loss of access to the commons. And because access to the commons and access to the Earth's resources that we all need to live is something that we all are entitled to as being, living, and that is if you actually believe in human rights. The UBI is the most pragmatic way to go about accomplishing that. And then Optimist goes on to say that, that UBI would be a recipe for hyperinflation. Well, no. Andrew Yang's plan bundled it with VAT taxes on luxury items. It taxes money out of circulation on the back end. And that also means that people who don't need the UBI, they would be getting taxed on the back end too. You can't dodge VAT. You can dodge income taxes. Okay? But you can't dodge VATs. You just can't. Okay? And an Optimist says, and inequality. I've already gone over how it's likely to be deficit spent the months rich people put off buying yachts, and that gives them an extra passive income by purchasing T-bills. What about the poor person like me who might like to put $50 a month into an ETF fund or into a mutual fund or into a savings account to improve my life? There's a lot more people like me in this country than there are rich people buying yachts. And if let's take this one step further. Suppose they buy those T-bills. Suppose they buy Apple stock. Did you know that you can trade derivatives on T-bills? Did you know that you can trade derivatives on ETFs like the SPY and on individual stocks? Yeah. In fact, you don't have to have a pile of money to buy a put or a call. A call is what you buy if you expect the underlying asset to go up. Okay, and the leveraged nature of the call means that you gain exponentially more than if you just bought the underlying asset yourself, itself. Whether it was that T-bill that Optimist is going on about, or whether it's a stock, or whether it's an ETF. This person's obsessing over rich people buying T-bills. What about all the poor people who that UBI might enable them to purchase a call on the TLT, which, that's T-bills. You can actually buy puts and calls on T-bills. And guarantee you'll get a hell of a better rate of return and passive income from doing that than by purchasing the T-bills. Okay? Ask me how I know this. I'll wait. This person's obsessed with this, though. And, Optimist says, sigh, even after everything I've said, you don't see past the empty platitudes or UBI advocates. And Amino, who's sitting there with his or her blue hat, definitely, fellow Yang Gang person there, says, I am a UBI advocate. I just don't follow them on Twitter. And then it starts to devolve into this insult fest that just makes no sense. They're saying, let democracy cause inflation through a labor supply shock. Oh, God. The Federal Reserve has no say in fiscal policy. I'm going to read this to you, what this person is saying. Why don't you believe in chartalism? This convo started about stimulus. Do future tax revenues need to offset past stimuli, even if the stimuli were ineffective? And Amino says, I don't know enough to commit myself either way. What I can say is that deficit-neutral proposals are an easier sell to the public at present, and that should not be surprising. And Optimist says, it is surprising because the entire reason the Fed is independent is because neoliberals believed that democracy would be inflationary. And here we are. That was their plan. It's been a long time in the making. Make the Fed independent to counter inflation, and then when democracy is fed up with the dynamic, confuse the issue, insist cash is better than skills, make it about the individual, and then let democracy cause inflation through a labor supply check or labor supply shock rather than bargaining power and demand, consolidate corporations by raising rates under the pretext of offsetting inflation, and then democracy will accept its serfdom to corporate overlords. That has been their plan. Well, that plan has nothing to do with UBI. And it's starting to sound really unhinged that this person would think that UBI has something to do with that. So Optimist goes on to further, say, well, it was Hayek and Friedman's deal. It only comes from progressive circles, kind of secondhand, because the basic income to all sounds nice, but only if you don't actually think too hard. I have to agree with Amino here. Yup, you're unhinged. That Hayek and Friedman supported UBI does not, as you insist, mean UBI is their policy. If anything, it's a testament to UBI's broad appeal and its realizability as a policy. To characterize UBI in this way is to conveniently pave over that fact. Pave over it with a steamroller, that is. And she says, I'm telling you, Optimist says, I'm telling you, the reason it has appeal to social Darwinist corporate feudalists, I'm calling neoliberals, that are diametrically opposed to democracy, populism, and egalitarianism, is that they want to see it faceplant. Is there a technical term in the DSM-5 to describe that degree of cognitive fucking dissonance? I don't know. God bless fellow Yang Gangers who are on this thread. And Amino says, that's for you and people who think like you are completely deluded because social Darwinist types think UBI is completely unnecessary. And that's a fact. They do. They didn't even want to give poor people a one-time $1,200 check when the COVID crisis broke out. They think poverty is a sufficient motivator on its own. And if you end up not surviving until you get lucky and something works out for you, oh well, too bad, so sad. Sorry for your luck. One less poor person taking up space in my fucking world. Social Darwinist, feudalist, whatever the hell optimists are talking about, they are not pro-UBI. They would rather just see all the poor suffer and die. And they have a lot of company. They have a lot of company in the top 20% who feel that way. And it's UBI advocates like Andrew Yang and like myself and like my friends in Yang Gang that have been, really up against a huge uphill battle. And the only way we were even able to get anybody to listen to the reasoning, listen to us on this, and at least give a shit enough to mitigate the suffering of the poor is by showing these selfish fucksticks how it would help them too. Because they certainly didn't care about the poor. And, it's the fact that poverty is not a motivator. Poverty kills people. Poverty causes permanent disability. Poverty means you end up sinking so far down into poverty that after too many things going against you with not enough going for you, you are so far down that you're unable to pull yourself up. You're not even able to get a job. UBI would head that off at the pass. And the people who think that it's okay that the poor should just suffer and die for not being lucky and or having to fucking end up committing suicide because you'd rather blow your brains out than have to beg yet again from the public at large for money to buy your next pack of Depends, or money for your utilities, or food, or an Uber to get to a medical appointment because you can't even afford a shitty used car. Only to get deluged with, well, why do you need money? Well, you can get food stamps. You can get Medicaid. Well, food stamps, I don't get enough in food stamps to buy 1 week's worth of diabetic-friendly food, never mind a month. Food stamps aren't going to fucking pay for my electric bill either. Or the property taxes so that at least I have a rundown house to have some shelter as opposed to none that I can't, shelter that I can't otherwise be thrown out of or have to be at the mercy of potentially abusive people in order to have a fucking sofa to crash on. Been there, done that in the past. I mean, this really just boils down to not concern for the poor, but just not wanting to make sure the poor get any money. UBI reduces poverty, and that's why we're all out here supporting it. And then Optimist, further down here, cites a conclusion from an FJG proponent saying that the guaranteed path to poverty reduction is to make a job available to anyone who wanted to work but who could currently not find work at a wage that was socially inclusive and above the poverty line. Well, that doesn't help the people who can't work. That doesn't help the old. It doesn't help the disabled or the less abled. It doesn't help people who are too poor and too economically unstable to even be able to go for any to succeed at any job, including a quote guaranteed one. Full employment is not, what gives people meaning. Having a good life, having money to have a good life, even if nobody else will give you a chance and all you've got is a little UBI money to survive on, and over time squirrel away a few dollars here and there, so at least you have the agency to carve your own path after an entire lifetime of getting opportunities denied to you and maybe preventing that same thing from happening to a lot of the other 12-year-old Jacquelines today who are homeless and being trafficked and faced with being, slapped with a 99-year sex offender status as a direct result of being arrested for prostitution from being trafficked. Yes, as 12-year-old kids. Because the majority of states still don't even have safe harbor laws that prevent underage trafficking victims from being criminalized. You know what a 99-year sex offender status means? It means that if a 12 or 13-year-old trafficking victim in Texas gets arrested and catches a prostitution charge, she won't be able to get a job, even at McDog Foods, for minimum wage, until she lives to be 112 or 113 years old, until that sex offender status falls off her record. Yes. Please tell the 12-year-old Jacquelines out there today how UBI wouldn't help them with fuck you money to escape their traffickers. Tell them how it wouldn't help them to survive after they escape in a society that threw them away and let them get trafficked and then punished them for it over and over again by throwing them away over and over again and never letting them have a chance until they finally were so down and so beaten down and so fucked and so far down in the poverty hole and age and health problems caught up with them that now they have no chance at all. If you think that's okay, then your moral compass lays somewhere between the toilet and the sewer. And you can seriously go fuck yourself. You don't speak for the poor. And you don't have a clue on what justice is. Job guarantees are just untenable. Optimist then goes on, and this is where they reveal their true colors. It's really not concern for the poor or the disabled or the people that are so badly off they can't, earn any income. They don't have any way of getting any money. This is where Optimist really lets their true colors show. When Amino 1 says, "I'm sure, but my position remains the same," to paraphrase Yogi Berra, there's no difference between theory and practice in theory. Job guarantees intended as an alternative or replacement for UBI are untenable in practice. An Optimist says, why? They've always worked. And no, they haven't always worked. Optimist says, I'll tell you that it was because it wasn't a complete legal right to socially useful labor. And then fails to define what socially useful labor is. Women's unvalued and unpaid work was definitely socially useful. Society wouldn't exist without it. Where's the remuneration so that many disadvantaged older women who don't have the skills or even the bare level resources to be able to try to carve out a way to earn money somehow, okay? If we were compensated for the socially useful labor of childbearing, child raising, caretaking, taking care of elderly and disabled family members, being an unpaid homemaker, supporting, the husband in his career at the expense of you not having, a chance to, have a career of your own because of systemic discrimination against women, which was never really resolved. I mean, equal opportunity never materialized for the poorest women in this country. Just as soon as the promises of the second wave feminist movement, after it, benefited the rich and, upper middle class women and failed to fulfill any of the promises of equality for poor women, in the 1980s, the jobs started to disappear. So we had a shrinking jobs pie just in time for at least some women to get lucky and get a chance after centuries of having no opportunities and being legally, property of males, being legally no more than fungible, disposable fetus containers and meat puppets. Sorry. Just telling it like it is. But, this amino person just on and on and on, fighting with UBI advocates, fighting with Yang Gang. Socially useful labor. What about people who can't work? What about the disabled? They don't have a right to live if they can't do what they define as socially useful? That's a real weasel word if you ask me. And it really speaks volumes as to where these people are coming from who are opposed to UBI. Right? Socially useful not only is a sneaky way for this person to walk back on their claim that job guarantees work, whereas UBI doesn't, which is crap. And they're using it as a way to walk back on their claim. Socially useful. It was never a complete legal right to socially useful labor. Well, when women's place was in the home, which was well into when I was a young adult, that was the way things were for the majority of women, okay, in this country. The socially useful labor that we were never paid for, and that is still reflective in the paltry sub-poverty widow's benefits or survivors' Social Security benefits that many of us have nothing else but that to look forward to rely on in old age, because we didn't get to have breadwinner jobs and build up Social Security credits. In my case, when things started to change as an older woman who was on the older side of Gen X, by the time that started to change, the jobs started to vanish. They started to vanish because of trade deals like NAFTA. They started to vanish because of globalism. They started to vanish because of automation. Because before automation kicked into high gear, the jobs were just, outsourced and offshored to countries that had, that they could just, what capital does, and this is, what Marxists are right about, is that capital does seek to maximize profit by minimizing costs. And if you are a worker, you're a line item cost. But here's the thing. This is what Marxists miss. That Georges nail on the head. There would be no capitalist without private property. Without governments and wealthy, powerful individuals who got theirs through a bloody history of might makes right, carving up pieces of the earth and excluding the majority of the people from those resources of the earth that nobody created. The prerequisite for capital or capitalism to even exist is private property. And even under a command system of communism or socialism, you still have private property. You still have a regime that wields the power that decides who deserves to survive and who does not, and what resources you do get access to. UBI says this is compensation for your data, for your loss of access to the commons. Your loss of access to the commons. Your loss of access to the natural resources you need to live. Socialism isn't going to fix that. What will fix that is a healthy dose of Georgism. UBI, compensate everyone. And yes, the rich who have garnered all the resources, they get it too, but they get taxed on the back end through a VAT. Okay? Anybody who purchases a luxury item will get taxed on the back end through a VAT. And that tax is not that high when you consider that you would have to spend $120,000 or more per year on goods for that VAT to kick in, for survival goods. I'm not talking clothing or food or Depends or diabetic test strips to test your blood sugar. I'm talking shit like yachts or luxury cars. Not a car that you need for reliable transportation, but a luxury car, an Aston Martin. Or the equivalent of that, right? Or your own private jet. That's where you would pay the VAT. So in this sense, it's really not regressive, and it is the best solution to mitigating the suffering caused by neoliberalism, which operates within the capitalist framework. But that doesn't mean that's the only way capitalism can exist. If we follow what many UBI advocates support, which is more of a Georgist approach, it's everybody is pragmatically compensated. You can't be denied this money. You don't get penalized or denied access to other resources and supports, like if you're disabled and you need Medicaid or Medicare or both. You're not denied those things. Those things are on top of the UBI. You get the UBI, and that doesn't get taken away from you. It doesn't get counted against you. It's recompense for your loss of access to the commons. It's recompense for a select few billionaire tech companies making ass tons of money off of your data that they never compensated you for, that they took. I mean, it is a pragmatic solution that alleviates the most suffering. If we go with a job guarantee, we are looking at, number one, single mothers, people who have to be unpaid caregivers, continuing to suffer in poverty with no income because their socially useful work is apparently not socially useful work in the ideas of a very much male-dominated socialist movement. The word Bernie Bros was coined for a reason. Women's unpaid labor has been deliberately devalued, not just by capitalists, but by communists and socialists too. They don't even acknowledge it. Right? Yet they wouldn't be alive and society wouldn't even exist without it. But yet that's somehow fails to make the A list for socially useful labor. Go figure. You know, the federal jobs guarantee would have to create jobs, and in the meantime, how do you live? You can't wait until a job is created for you when you need food right now, when you need housing right now, when you need to keep your electric on right now so your insulin don't spoil, and so that you have internet so that you can keep on trying. Because you can't keep on trying if you don't have anything, and you're now looking at ending up dead from acute diabetic distress because you had no money and your power was shut off and your insulin went bad, or you're homeless and you had no place to store it. Right? How do you survive until that jobs guarantee can be ramped up and make sure that you're provided with a job? How will you know where to go to access one if you're homeless and you don't have access to the internet? Because you lost everything, including your computer that you had when you were still housed, but, were struggling only to not get a chance for a job or an earning opportunity of some sort. How's job guarantee going to help you when you're living in a fucking donated tent under an overpass? And you haven't been able to take your insulin in 3 days because you haven't been able to buy food, and your insulin's spoiled because you had no way to keep the shit refrigerated. At least without loss of access to the commons, I could pitch a yurt on the shores of Lake Erie and keep my insulin from spoiling by keeping it submerged in cool water. But I don't have the ability to do that. I don't have the legal right to do that. I don't have the legal right to use what resources the earth provides that are available, because they've been artificially made unavailable to me and every other poor person. And the only way to compensate compensate everyone for our loss of access to these natural resources that no one created is a UBI. It's the only sensible thing to do. The jobs guarantee? Okay, let's see how this would work. You've got no car. You're medically disabled. You don't have the skill set, for jobs that your physical limitations won't, prohibit you from doing, but you have a skills deficit that will prohibit you from doing it. How's a job guarantee going to help you? How's a job guarantee going to help you when you don't have the basic economic stability you need to survive until you even get a first paycheck, even if it's a job picking up dog shit out of the local public park? And quite frankly, if you think that's okay to force poor, disadvantaged people to work for rich people who let their dog shit in a park and don't even pick up the poop, I got a couple of words for you. Poor people don't exist to clean up your shit. It's your shit or your pet's shit. You clean it up. Or you automate that shit. Tip of the hat to Scott Santens. And then Optimist goes on here to say that UBI, that Yeah, Amino says it's just much simpler to issue everyone money. And that's true. You create the job guarantee. How's it going to help people in the outlying rural areas that are poor and who don't have a car, who don't have internet access, who don't have... I mean, where I live, there's people in the outlying areas of Erie County that are still on fucking dial-up. If they have internet at all. And, when you don't have a car, when you don't have a place to live with heat in the winter so you don't freeze to death, how's a job guarantee going to help you when you may not survive long enough for that job guarantee to get around to guaranteeing you a job? Provided that there's one that can be created for you that you can do. With physical health problems, with age, with learning disabilities, with lack of a car, with physical disabilities. And then there's the logistics issue. Where do you go to report to get your guaranteed job? Will it be done online? What about people who don't have internet? Because they lost everything and they don't even have a computer anymore. And they're now homeless. And rural homelessness is a lot different than urban homelessness. But you never see that highlighted. It's not like they would have transportation to just get to the nearest job center. If that's where it would be. So how would you get one? And then, how would you get to the job? You would need transportation. What if you need to leave work early because your kid got sick? And by the way, if caretaking isn't socially useful labor and doesn't count as work, when women do it for our own families, whether it's grandkids, like my neighbor, she's a single, for all intents and purposes, she's a single parent to her grandkids. But she doesn't get any of the help and benefits that a single mother gets. Because she's a grandmother. She's not their mother. She's their grandmother. All right? Socially useful labor. Yeah, so that her adult kids can have their lives freed up to pursue their jobs or whatever it is that they're doing that they can't be bothered to raise their own kids. She's raising them in poverty, like we're living in poverty. I mean, everybody where I live here is poor. Socially useful labor. If it's socially useful labor for someone to get a job as a daycare worker, then why isn't it socially useful labor when my neighbor Lisa Aarons is taking care of her 6 grandkids, 3 of whom have disabilities? 2 of them are autistic. One of them has a rare autoimmune disease that he was born with. Why isn't caretaking a socially useful labor deserving of a paycheck when me and my elderly husband are trying to take care of each other? With no income, no resources, no nothing, with me having to put myself out there and beg whenever we get hit by a crisis that we just are not able to handle. And that crisis don't have to be a lot. It was, an unexpected $400 a month increase on his life insurance premium that it's like we can't meet that. And letting the life insurance go means I will have no way to bury him and I will have no way to survive when he's gone because his Social Security goes. And you can bet your ass I got not one dime in a 401k or Social Security credit for my years as an unpaid homemaker, for lack of any other opportunities because of how many things I had in my life that were going against me starting at age 12 when I got trafficked. How is a job guarantee going to help me? What's it going to do for me? Socially useful labor? Oh, well, we can pay you to work in an elder care home or in a daycare. Why not just pay the women who are providing that care right now for their families? If it's not valuable enough to pay for women to receive in our own homes, then why should it be deemed socially useful for a daycare center or an elder care center? It's either socially useful or it's not. You don't get to have it two ways. And if you're willing to pay people to do it in a care center, whether it's for children or the elderly or the disabled, then you should be doing it for women on whom that work primarily falls, although it does fall on men too sometimes. Then you should pay people for doing it for their own families in their own homes. It is not sometimes work. It is all the time work. And it's either socially useful all the time or it's not socially useful at all. You don't get to have you don't get to have it both ways here. Another problem with the job guarantee is the logistics. Okay, you get the job. You don't have a car. How do you get there? Well, we'll provide public transportation. Well, that's nice. I live in a rural area. There's no infrastructure for that shit. They discontinued half the damn bus service that was available. And what if I need to leave in the middle of a shift because my elderly husband has an emergency and I need to get home to take care of him? Or my neighbor who is, the adopted parent, who's the grandparent, without single mother benefits of 6 kids, and she has to jet from her guaranteed job somewhere else to rush to the school or to the child care or whatever to pick up a sick kid. You don't have a car. You can't just leave when you need to. And you might need to leave at a time that it's not, you ain't even got time to call and wait for a fucking Uber. And where I live, that's pretty expensive because everything's far apart. You're going to all clear across the county for anything, So now you got to call an Uber. Because, you don't have a car. You got to depend on a public bus, if there is one, to get to the guaranteed job. And suppose they provide a shuttle. Suppose they provide a work shuttle. But that shuttle only leaves twice a day. It brings you in and takes you home. Which means if you need to leave unexpectedly in the middle of your shift because of a family emergency, you're screwed. You can't do it. You can't go pick up that sick child. You can't get home to that elderly family member or that disabled family member or spouse that's having a major problem and needs help. And I don't mean 911 help. I mean help because they fell and they can't get up. Or they got their arms stuck in the garbage disposal or something fucking crazy. Yeah, I mean, this isn't a very well thought out thing, this federal jobs guarantee. It's really not. It is really much simpler to just issue everyone money. And at least issuing everyone money at least acknowledges that, unpaid caretakers, caregivers, or that at least are, unpaid time and unpaid work is socially useful. And at least, if anything else, at least we are entitled to survive with a little teeny tiny bit of basic human dignity so that I don't have to beg for my next month's supply of Depends, or keeping my internet on, or my electric on, or paying for an Uber to get to one of my diabetic medical care appointments, or buying food that I don't get enough in food stamps to pay for that I can't use on Instacart, because without a car, that's the only way I can shop for groceries where I live. And being diabetic, it's not like I can use my EBT card on Amazon because they only allow certain foods to be allowed by the welfare food stamp card. And the foods they allow are not diabetic friendly, which means I can't have that. I can't have it. I can't have the rice, the pasta, regular bread. I've got to have special low-carb bread. I can't have pasta. And I can't buy shirataki noodles, which, is a non-pasta type of pasta substitute. I can't buy those on food stamps. Amazon won't let me. I can't buy diabetic-friendly foods that I need. And it's not an option. I can't just undiabetic myself. Just because privileged people think that they should have some kind of right to dictate what I need to survive. How about you give me money and let me get what I need to survive that I know that I need? You deprived me of access to opportunities my whole life. How about not depriving me of the money I need to live now? It's the least you owe me. It's the least you owe everyone. Whether they need it or not, everybody is owed that because of being deprived of access to the commons. And because of their data. Okay? And anyway, Optimist goes on here to say, if you listen to how Supreme Court cases go down, you kind of realize that most adjudication is about interpreting the meaning of the law. That's just how everything works. Well, you know how everything works, just how everything works? For years, domestic violence wasn't considered a crime because that's just how things work. Men were the breadwinners, women were the homemakers and caretakers. If they were lucky to not be abandoned and left without a home and be taken care of. And often they had to put up with a lot of fucking abuse and had to beg for little bits of money doled out to them by their husbands who had autocratic, paternalistic control over the fucking money. Because that's just how things work. That's just the natural order of things. Women don't want to be lawyers. They don't want to be judges. They want to marry lawyers. Yeah. That was during my time. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was fighting for the right to be a lawyer and eventually become a judge at a time where that's just not how everything worked. Because the natural order of things was women have babies, women are homemakers, men take care of the women. Except it didn't work out too fucking well, because if it really would have worked out all that well, there wouldn't have been a women's liberation movement in the first place. UBI may not be how everything works right now. And maybe Optimist thinks how Supreme Court cases go down and that's just how everything works. And I don't know where they're even getting into that, because the UBI has not been made in a Supreme Court case yet. Though if I had my way, it would be. Okay? Because condemning people to suffer and die from poverty is a clear-cut violation of the U.S. Constitution. The 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment and torture. Extrajudicial murder. When you condemn somebody to die from poverty because they're just not lucky in life and have too much going against them, you are complicit in the commission of extrajudicial homicide. In clear violation of the 8th Amendment. Okay? Fact. Don't let my facts make you uncomfortable. But this person's saying just how everything works. Well, for many years, how everything works, children were considered the property of parents. You could actually murder your kid by beating him or her to death. And you'd be lucky if you got, a slap on the wrist or a misdemeanor. It wasn't a crime. It was not a crime. Because that's just the way things are. That's just the natural order of things. That's just how everything works. Men are the head of the household. Men are the king of the castle. Men are the family breadwinners. Women and children, property. That's not how things work today. But it was because of a long, long battle that never was completely won, because we never really realized the full, promise of equality in this country. Because before that could happen, the jobs started to vanish. So what we all now have the equal opportunity for is we all have the equal opportunity to suffer and die from poverty if we weren't, lucky to be born into the fucking lucky sperm club. The top fucking 20%. And even that's not a guarantee. More like you have to be born in the top 1% to be guaranteed a good slot in life. Okay? Because you can be born in the upper middle class and still find that there is not enough spaces for even you. And you get left out. Or your kid gets left out. UBI changes that. It changes it because it says everybody at least gets their basic enough to meet their basic needs to live with dignity, enough to live and to meet their needs in a way that's appropriate for them, because we all have different needs. I'm diabetic. Maybe you're not. Maybe you don't need to, I'm also an older lady with problems that were from diabetic complications. Maybe you don't need extra things that I do. Maybe you need other extra things that are different for your needs. We all don't have the same needs. We all need food. We all need clothing. We all need shelter. We all need heat in the winter. We all need to be cool in the summer. And we all need a certain access to, personal hygiene to prevent things from like septic infections and shit. But it's, it's like how much of one or the other and what kind that differs. Diabetics have different needs than people with celiac disease. People with Crohn's disease have different needs than people who are able to be vegans without a problem. Okay? I mean, we all have different needs. And you can't just, that's why the UBI is so much more effective, because you're able to address your needs, not what somebody else thinks you need or wants to control your access to getting the need met by saying, well, you got to justify everything in your life and you got to submit to an audit of your whole fucking life before I maybe decide to maybe fucking help you. Most people make me sick. Optimist says, tautological reality? As far as I'm concerned, I can go my whole life and never get a job nor any sort of an outlet to help society, with UBI or not, and ultimately I will end up blaming myself for it. I don't know why you think we have laws to begin with. Okay. Here's the thing. If you blame yourself because you weren't able to get a chance for a job, that means you have internalized America's deep-seated problem with classism. And its obstinate refusal to have an honest conversation about poverty and the fact that there has always been a certain percentage of the population that was involuntarily, economically, and socially excluded. And these things, this is a structural issue. This is a structural injustice. You don't blame yourself for something you don't have control over. Nobody asks to be permanently shut out and poor and not have a chance. But when you have a UBI, even if you are permanently shut out, at least you're not deprived of a life of basic human dignity. And you have something to keep on trying with, even if it means trying to carve out your own path when no one else will remove the fucking roadblocks and barriers on top of barriers on all the other, paths that are available to people who aren't disadvantaged. Who don't face those barriers. At least UBI, it's a way to say, okay, all these roads are blocked. Here's my jet power pack emergency flight pack. I can just like beep up straight up in the air and fly right over that fucking barrier. You know, zero income, you know, you're stuck. But $1,000 a month, you're not stuck. As long as you have something to keep trying with and you're able to survive and you have enough resources to live and keep trying with. The key is having enough resources to keep trying with. If you don't even have that, you know, you're screwed. That UBI at least alleviates that. Will it alleviate you being left out of being able to get a good job and a good slot in society? No. But at least you won't suffer and die from poverty. At least you won't be without any hope at all of ever being able to fix your life within what few, if any, limited options are left available to you. Not having a UBI guarantees you have no options ever. And you die prematurely from a preventable cause. Means like you die from finally getting so fed up you blow your fucking brains out because you can't take having to beg anymore only to get not helped or people judging you because you're begging for money, which you wouldn't be if you fucking had an income that was enough to live. Nobody begs because they enjoy it. If they do, I don't know. I mean, I'd sooner eat a fucking bullet. Because I've had to go that route too many times. And you have no idea how soul-crushing it is. When you have no way of getting any money, you can't get a job, and you've tried everything. And as you get older, opportunities have a shelf life, and opportunities become closed to you forever. Forever. And after a certain age, there are exactly 0 opportunities left for you. And this society pretty much just throws you away. Doesn't give a fuck about you. Doesn't give a fuck that you might have once had hopes and dreams and you were deprived and cheated your whole fucking life. How's a job guarantee gonna fix that? Optimist says, well, I can go my whole life and never get a job or any sort of outlet to help society, with UBI or not, and ultimately I will end up blaming myself for it. Well, then you need to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because you don't blame yourself for when you don't have the power to exercise any control over a situation. When you are on the losing end of a privilege and power dynamic, that's not your fault. Okay, and you don't blame yourself for that. I don't blame myself for that. And I would encourage you not to blame yourself for that. It's this workist attitude that if you don't have a job that is socially useful for paid work and earning enough to live, that you don't deserve anything. You deserve nothing except to be thrown away and treated like shit. And if you want to, whoop your own ass when there's a whole country full of selfish, self-centered fucksticks that'll do it for you, I don't know what to tell you. But I'm here to tell you that you have no business blaming yourself for being shut out. But depriving everybody of a UBI is not going to fix your mental health issue with blaming yourself for shit that you have no business blaming yourself for. You put blame where blame belongs. Right? Okay? And secondly, to get back to the original point, with the Supreme Court cases and laws that this person initially brought up when saying, if you listen to how Supreme Court cases go down, it's, adjudications about interpreting the meaning of the law. Okay, laws have to do with they don't have to do with whether or not, oh God. The reason we have laws is to settle disputes and to keep society in order. Now, what I mean by that is we have laws against peeing in a public pool. We have laws against running down the street butt naked. We have laws against civilians being able to buy anti-tank and personnel explosive incendiary devices. We have laws against dumping, against poisoning, putting cyanide in food or over-the-counter medicine. That's what laws are for. Laws are for maintaining some semblance of a civil society. It has nothing to do with ascribing blame to the jobless poor for being jobless and poor. I would argue that the law, specifically the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, bolsters my claim for UBI. Because to otherwise condemn people who've been left out and who are permanently shut out with no hope and no chance to suffer preventable disability and death from poverty is extrajudicial murder, it is torture, and it is cruel and unusual punishment, and it's something that was being inflicted without even any fucking due process. And the 8th Amendment prohibits all those things. That makes the case for UBI, folks. And Optimist says, yeah, but if you're prevented from doing anything for society, which people are by not being guaranteed a socially valuable job or career, that sucks. People kill themselves and kill other people in those circumstances. They beat their spouses and they abuse their children. No, it's not because they're not being guaranteed a socially valuable job or career. It's because they are being deprived of the access to money that said socially valuable job or career would provide. And they have no alternative mechanism for getting that money that they need to live, and they need to live in dignity. Because you can't be happy when you're poor. It sucks. When you have to always beg only to not get helped, or to have people who can afford to help you say, well, why do you need money? Why don't you just go to a charity? When you've been to all these agencies and they haven't helped you, all they did was suck up your time. And you get so sick and tired of having to explain that to the privileged over and over and over every time that you have to beg for your life. Because they're getting a slot and a good space and a chance meant you and a whole bunch of others like you not getting shit. And it's the way you're fucking treated in the interim, on top of the real material deprivation, the way you're treated when you have to beg because you need money for the same reason that the people that are lucky and have a good spot in society need their incomes. People don't kill themselves because of not being guaranteed a socially valuable job or career. They kill themselves because life in poverty has been made so miserable and intolerable. And the further you sink into poverty, the less hope you ever have of making it out. And all you're guaranteed is for things to get worse as you get older, as you get sick, as you develop health problems. And you just eventually say, fuck it, I can't take anymore. That is when people kill themselves. That is why people freak out and have meltdowns and abuse their spouses and kids. Because we live in a society that tells those who've been shut out and with no hope of ever getting on our feet because of having lost everything after trying and trying and trying only to not get a chance. It's the suffering and the misery that people end up killing themselves over. And it's not because they don't have purpose. It's because they don't get to live with any dignity. They don't have no money. They can't live. They have to beg for help and often not get it. Or have people castigate them and accuse them of being a con artist or a scammer because the only way they can get any money is by begging. And they need money for the same reason that you do. That's why people kill themselves. That's why poverty causes people to fucking, when they can't handle it anymore, blow their fucking brains out. Especially when they suffered and struggled and tried their whole life only to get nothing for it except shit and shoved in it. And never get included and never get helped and never have enough things go right. That for every one person who was an angel who helped them, there were, so that they might have a chance to fix their life, they all of a sudden had 3 things go wrong in spades that overpowered the one good thing or the help they did get, that just, they ended up, being put further behind by the bad shit that ended up happening to them. That was out of their control and out of anybody's control. And when you get to the point where you just can't handle having to beg again, only to have people say, well, have you tried? As if you never fucking tried anything. That's why I smoke like a fucking chimney. Because I'm so stressed out. But being diabetic, I can't even escape the hell of poverty and lack of hope through a fucking occasional glass of wine because I'm diabetic. I can't even fucking drink. So I smoke to calm my nerves. I make my own cigarettes with tobacco and a rolling machine. At least that and my coffee that's all I got to keep me going. And I would be lying if I didn't admit to having thought more than once about how inviting a rope over a rafter in the attic started to look to me. And it wasn't because I didn't have a guaranteed socially valuable job or career. It was because I was pushed out of the economy my whole life, and no matter what I tried to do and how hard I tried, I got nothing but abused and kept down by other people with more privilege and power than me, and denied access to money that I need to live in a little bit of dignity so that I don't have to be humiliated with having to beg and say, I need $60 to buy this month's worth of Depends, which is not a luxury when you have neuropathy in the bladder and you're incontinent and you soil your clothing because you can't sense when your bladder is full, and your bladder can't sense when it's full, and it fails to empty properly, and you end up having problems where you soil your clothing and what you're sitting on. And there's no surgery that can fix that because neuropathy caused from diabetes is not reversible. It's not curable. And there you are, because of being poor, having to beg for money from strangers just to afford this month's pack of Depends. Because the help you did get would have been enough if not for 3 more things that just went wrong immediately after you got that help that knocked you further back and further down. That's what makes people fucking kill themselves. It's the not having any hope because of nothing getting better no matter how hard you try, and just having horrible luck, and you don't even have a UBI to land on. You have nothing. And then you're having to resort to begging again and again, and it's just soul crushing. And it leaves you wondering why the fuck you didn't eat a bullet 30 years ago and spare yourself an entire life of suffering and poverty and getting nothing but shit on by everybody else in society that was lucky and was more fortunate than you. You want to talk about what makes people commit suicide? Being deprived of any hope of a life of dignity through having enough income to live. Doesn't matter if it comes from a job. It's the ability to at least be able to live with some basic dignity and not have to beg to get it. So I can't understand how this person, if they claim to know so much, they don't know that or see that, or if they do know, they're being very dishonest. You know, they're being very dishonest. And they go on and on and on. All this time they spent, they must have a lot of privilege. They must be living pretty fucking comfortably to have all this time. This threat is still going on, where this person is attacking UBI advocates and Yang Gang. I really